In this video, I'm about to reveal 30 restaurant brand items you should never pick up and exactly why, plus 10 clean, safer, and genuinely better choices that are actually worth ordering, starting with number 30, TGI Friday's Frozen Appetizers. TGI Friday's frozen appetizers look tempting in the grocery freezer, but behind the crispy photos and restaurant branding is one of the most industrially engineered snack lines on shelves. The mozzarella sticks, loaded potato skins, and chicken bites all rely on multi-layered breading stabilizers, including modified starches and anti-caking compounds designed to survive deep freezing and refrying without falling apart. That's why they feel gummy on the inside, greasy on the outside, and never crisp up the way the box promises. To extend freezer shelf life, these appetizers contain preservative salts like sodium phosphate that boost water retention but also leave a heavy, metallic aftertaste. The cheese fillers aren't always whole dairy either. Some batches use processed cheese analogs, mixtures of milk solids, oils, and flavor enhancers. Add in industrial fry oils, often high in reheated soybean oil, and you get a product that's far from restaurant quality. Consumer complaints often mention leaking oil, inconsistent texture, soggy coating, and salty chemical flavor, all signs of aggressive flash fry and freeze cycling. If you're craving authentic appetizers, skip TGI Friday's freezer versions. They're among the most overprocessed, salt-packed, and texture-engineered restaurant-branded foods you can buy. Number 29. Red Baron Pizza, Schwann's Restaurant Tie-Ins. Red Baron pizzas may look like nostalgic comfort food, but their Schwann's Restaurant Supply tie-ins mean one thing. These pizzas are built for mass-scale production, not authentic flavor. The dough is made using industrial dough conditioners that keep the crust soft even after months of freezing. These conditioners, like L-cysteine and Datem, create the infamous rubbery, bready chew that never feels like fresh pizza. The sauce is another red flag. Red Baron relies on high fructose corn syrup, citric acid boosters, and dehydrated tomato bases instead of authentic slow-simmered sauce. That's why the flavor is sharp, sweet, and slightly artificial. The cheese blend often contains anti-caking agents and modified food starch to prevent clumping, leaving the melt inconsistent and sometimes plasticky. Even worse, Red Baron pizzas are incredibly high in sodium and stabilized fats, engineered to taste restaurant bold without ever using premium ingredients. The pepperoni and sausage crumbles are highly processed, often containing fillers, coloring agents, and smoke flavor instead of true hardwood smoking. While marketed as restaurant-inspired, Red Baron is really restaurant supply-style food science, not fresh pizza. For real pizza lovers, it's one of the least worthy picks in the frozen aisle. Number 28. California Pizza Kitchen Frozen Pizza. California Pizza Kitchen's restaurant pizzas have a cult following, but their frozen grocery versions deliver a shockingly different experience, and not in a good way. These frozen pies rely on ultra-processed crust formulas, including emulsifiers and rapid rise dough enhancers that give the crust its stereotypical flat, crackery snap instead of the restaurant's airy, blistered dough. The toppings are another disappointment. CPK frozen pizzas often use pasteurized processed cheese blends, not the fresh mozzarella or authentic smoked cheeses used in stores. Many versions contain mold inhibitors and modified starches to keep toppings from spoiling during long freezer storage. The result is cheese that browns unevenly, and sauce that separates under heat. Restaurant CPK is known for bright flavors, but the frozen line depends heavily on natural flavors, dehydrated vegetables, and sugar-enhanced sauces to mimic taste, creating a flavor profile that feels overly sweet, acidic, and one-dimensional. Consumer complaints frequently mention burnt edges with soggy centers, a sign of industrial par-bake processing before freezing. CPK's frozen pizzas are convenient, but they're nothing like the restaurant originals. They're one of the most overstabilized, flavor-enhanced, and quality-compromised frozen restaurant brand pizzas on shelves. Number 27. Hooters Wing Breading Mix. Hooters Wing Breading Mix claims to deliver restaurant-style wings at home, but what you actually get is one of the most chemically padded frying mixes in the grocery aisle. Unlike typical flour spice blends, Hooters Mix uses industrial anti-caking agents, modified starches, and leavening chemicals designed to create the signature puffed coating you see in their restaurants. That's why the breading fries into a thick, oddly spongy layer, instead of a crisp, clean crunch. The mix also contains flavor amplifiers like autolyzed yeast extract, which artificially boosts savoriness without adding authentic spices. Combined with sodium acid pyrophosphate and calcium carbonate, the coating develops that exaggerated fried flavor that tastes more processed than homemade. When mixed with oil, these compounds can create a metallic aftertaste and an inconsistent crust texture. Because it's designed to work in industrial fryers, the mix performs poorly in home kitchens. It often absorbs too much oil, leading to greasy, soggy wings that brown unevenly. Consumer complaints frequently mention clump formation, gritty texture, and breading that slides off despite dredging. Hooters wing breading mix might sound fun, but in reality, it's a high additive, oil-soaking, chemically leavened coating that's nothing like real home cooking and far from restaurant quality. Number 26. Olive Garden salad dressing. Olive Garden's iconic salad dressing tastes dreamy in the restaurant, but the bottled grocery version is an entirely different formula. Instead of the fresh emulsions made in store, the bottled dressing is built on industrial stabilizers, including xanthan gum, guar gum, and emulsifying starches that keep the liquid from separating during extended storage. This leads to a slick, gluey mouthfeel rather than the light, zesty vinaigrette diners expect. To maintain shelf life for up to a year, Kraft, the manufacturer, uses acid regulators, preservatives like potassium sorbate, concentrated flavor extracts, and deodorized oils. These ingredients mimic the garlic parmesan taste, but also create a strong artificial tang that sticks to the palate. The bottled version also contains high fructose corn syrup in certain variations, altering the flavor balance and making the dressing sweeter than the restaurant's original. Many consumers report a noticeable chemical scent caused by the dressing's stabilized vinegar base, which behaves differently once refrigerated. The restaurant version is made fresh daily, but the bottled one is treated for mass production, long shipping, and months-long storage. Olive Garden's bottled dressing is convenient, but it's far from fresh. It's one of the most preservative-loaded, flavor-enhanced, and texturally altered restaurant dressings on store shelves. Number 25. Cheesecake Factory at-home desserts. Cheesecake Factory's restaurant desserts are legendary, but the at-home freezer desserts are practically a different species. To achieve a stable, sliceable texture after months in the freezer, these desserts rely on heavy-duty stabilizers like carrageenan, cellulose gum, modified starch, and gelatin blends. This gives them a firmness that borders on jelly-like, lacking the fresh, creamy softness of the restaurant version. The cheesecakes also use frozen dairy bases made from cream substitutes, whey concentrate, and processed cream cheese analogs. These ingredients resist ice crystallization but leave a waxy, artificial coating in the mouth. The topping sauces are equally engineered. Most rely on corn syrup, artificial flavors, and color-protected fruit purees that don't resemble fresh fruit. To survive thaw-refreeze cycles during transport, the cakes undergo blast freezing and partial pre-baking, which can make the crust overly complicated and the filling excessively dense. Consumer complaints often mention rubbery texture, chemical aftertaste, soggy crusts, and uneven thawing, all signs of ultra-processed dessert engineering. While the restaurant is famous for rich, bakery-quality slices, the at-home versions are some of the most stabilized, filler-heavy, and texture-modified desserts in the freezer aisle. Number 24. P.F. Chang's Home Menu Frozen Meals. P.F. Chang's home menu meals look premium, but they're built using the same industrial batch cooking systems used for airline meals, not fresh restaurant stir-fry. The biggest issue is the heavy use of thickening systems, including modified tapioca starch, maltodextrin, and xanthan gum, which gives sauces a sticky, glossy gel coat instead of the light wok sautéed texture you'd get in the restaurant. The proteins are another problem. Instead of fresh-cut chicken or beef, the frozen versions often use water-injected, phosphate-treated meats, designed to stay soft after freezing. While safe, these additives create a spongy, artificial chew that never crisps or browns, even in a hot pan. Vegetables in the home menu line undergo IQF blanching, which strips color and nutrients before freezing. The result is veggies that taste watery, metallic, or mushy. The meals also lean heavily on sodium boosters, soy protein isolates, liquid smoke, and flavor extracts to mimic restaurant wok flavor without real heat. Consumer complaints consistently mention soggy vegetables, oily sauces, rubbery meat, and oversalted taste, all classic signs of freeze-stabilized entrees. While convenient, P.F. Chang's home menu meals are among the most texture-modified, sodium-pumped, and flavor-engineered products in the frozen Asian food category. Number 23. Chili's Frozen Meals. Chili's frozen entrees promise restaurant flavor at home, but what you really get is a meal built with high-volume stabilizers and industrial reheating chemistry instead of fresh Tex-Mex cooking. To survive months of deep freezing, the sauces in these meals rely on gum blends, modified cornstarch, guar gum, and dairy stabilizers, giving them that artificially thick, gravy-like coating that Chili's is not known for. The meats are often pre-cooked, injected with sodium phosphates and moisture binders, then frozen rapidly. When reheated, these additives cause the protein fibers to tighten and shrink, giving the beef and chicken an unmistakably rubbery, bouncy bite. Chili's frozen fajita bowls, quesadillas, and pastas also contain flavor concentrates and smoke extracts, which attempt to imitate grill char but end up tasting synthetic and overly bold. The biggest issue is that many entrees exceed 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams of sodium per serving, an enormous level engineered to compensate for flavor loss during freezing. Consumers frequently complain that Chili's frozen items taste overly salty, mushy, greasy, or strangely sweet, depending on the batch. These aren't Chili's meals. They're starch-thickened, salt-heavy, freezer-engineered versions that barely resemble the authentic restaurant dishes. Number 22. Red Lobster Cheddar Bay Biscuit Mix. Red Lobster's Cheddar Bay biscuits are iconic in the restaurant, but the boxed grocery mix is a highly processed imitation designed for shelf life, not fresh baking. The dry blend includes bleached enriched flour, anti-caking agents, sodium aluminum phosphate, and artificial leavening accelerators, which create a biscuit that rises fast but tastes metallic and overly dense compared to the fluffy restaurant version. The cheddar flavor doesn't come from real cheese inside the mix. It's mostly cheese powder, whey solids, artificial butter flavors, and coloring compounds meant to mimic the restaurant's authentic dairy blend. The included herb packet contains dehydrated seasonings and flavor enhancers, not the fresh garlic parsley blend they brush on biscuits in-house. The biggest problem is the butter topping, which the boxed version simulates using seasoning blends that contain maltodextrin, natural flavors, and anti-caking agents, resulting in a topping that feels oily but lacks real depth. Many customers report the biscuits tasting chalky, overly salty, or artificial, all classic signs of chemically accelerated baking mixes. While nostalgic, the Red Lobster biscuit mix is one of the most processed, flavor-simulated, and chemically leavened restaurant brand items at the grocery store. Number 21. Texas Roadhouse Rolls. Texas Roadhouse restaurant rolls are famous for being warm, fluffy, and pulled straight from the oven. But the frozen retail version is built with a completely different formula. To keep the dough stable for months, manufacturers rely on dough conditioners like mono and diglycerides, datum, and emulsifiers, all of which artificially boost softness even after long-term freezing. These additives create a uniform, sponge-like crumb that lacks the subtle chew of a fresh yeast roll. The frozen version also uses preservative salts, sorbic acid blends, and enzyme-modified flours to prevent staling. Instead of natural fermentation, the dough undergoes accelerated rise cycles, which remove the buttery aroma people associate with the restaurant rolls. Once baked at home, these rolls tend to develop a tough exterior and gummy interior, classic symptoms of doughs stabilized for freezer distribution. Another issue? The added industrial sweeteners, including corn syrup solids, attempt to mimic the roll's signature sweetness, but leave a noticeably synthetic aftertaste. Consumers frequently complain about dense texture, uneven browning, and a flat, artificial smell coming from the baked rolls. The restaurant has magic, but the frozen retail version is a chemically softened, speed-fermented, freezer-engineered imitation that never recreates the original. Number 20. Outback Steakhouse Bloomin' Onion Chips. Outback's Bloomin' Onion is iconic, but the bagged Bloomin' Onion chips are one of the most aggressively engineered snack foods under a restaurant brand. These chips start as reconstituted potato starch and corn flour, not real sliced potatoes. The mixture is pressed, fried, dusted with powdered seasonings, and then sprayed with flavor oils, mimicking the taste of the fried onion without using actual onion pieces. The seasoning blend relies heavily on disodium inosinate, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, autolyzed yeast extract, and smoke flavoring, which create a powerful fried onion aroma through chemical shortcuts. The chips also contain silicon dioxide anti-caking agents, and the frying process uses high-temperature hydrogenated oils to maintain structure, resulting in a dense, brittle crunch rather than a natural crisp. Because they emulate a deep-fried appetizer, sodium levels are incredibly high, and flavor enhancers are layered to create an addictive, lingering aftertaste. Many users report the chips tasting harsh, overly perfumed, and throat-burning, a sign of stacked artificial flavor compounds. The powder also contains stabilized dairy solids, which can become bitter as the product ages. Outback's Bloomin' Onion chips aren't a treat. They're one of the most lab-constructed, flavor-sprayed, starch-pressed restaurant snack products in any supermarket aisle. Number 19. Panera Mac and Cheese. Panera's Cafe Mac and Cheese is creamy, but the grocery tub version is built for shipment, reheating, and weeks of refrigerated storage, not freshness. The base uses ultra-pasteurized dairy, which is heated at extremely high temperatures to extend shelf life but leaves a cooked, slightly caramelized milk flavor. To maintain creaminess despite this processing, the sauce includes modified food starch, sodium citrate, cellulose gel, and enzyme-treated cheese powders, creating a smooth texture that feels uniform but strangely slick. The pasta is par-cooked and treated with acid regulators and oil coatings to prevent clumping during storage. This results in noodles that taste mushy, waterlogged, or slippery once reheated, a common issue with refrigerated pasta products. The cheese flavor also relies on natural flavors, concentrated dairy solids, and emulsifying salts, not the authentic aged cheeses Panera advertises in restaurants. Panera's grocery mac and cheese consistently faces complaints about grainy separation, rubbery pasta, excessive saltiness, and oily puddling after microwaving. These are classic signs of a sauce built with stabilizers instead of fresh cream and cheese. Instead of cafe comfort food, the grocery tub is a highly stabilized, ultra-pasteurized, texture-corrected imitation that lacks the warmth, depth, and authenticity of the real thing. Number 18. Panera Salad Dressings. Panera markets its bottled dressings as clean, but the regular grocery line is far from the fresh dressings served in its cafes. To extend shelf life far beyond what a fresh dressing could survive, Panera's retail dressings rely on heavy-duty stabilizers like xanthan gum, gum acacia, and modified starches, all of which create that thick, glue-like viscosity you never get in store. The oils used in the bottled versions are highly refined, deodorized soybean or canola oils, designed for stability rather than flavor. These oils lose natural aromatics during processing, so manufacturers compensate with flavor concentrates, acidifiers, and amplified sweeteners, leaving the final product tasting sharper, sweeter, and more artificial than anything Panera serves fresh. The dressings also contain pasteurized egg derivatives, preservative salts, and high-acidity vinegar bases to control microbial growth during months of storage. This aggressive acid treatment gives the dressing a harsh, sour bite instead of the balanced, creamy tang Panera is known for. Consumer complaints frequently mention oily separation, unexpected sweetness, and a lingering chemical aftertaste, all signs of industrial emulsions. Panera's grocery dressings may look authentic, but they're really shelf-stabilized, artificially balanced, and texture-modified versions of their cafe originals, and not worth picking up. Number 17. White Castle Frozen Sliders. White Castle's frozen sliders might look nostalgic, but freeze processing transforms them into one of the most structurally altered fast food replicas in the grocery aisle. The buns undergo steam injection, chemical softening, and preservative treatment before freezing so they won't crumble after thawing. This results in that unmistakably spongy, damp texture once microwaved. The patties are par-cooked using steam griddles, then rapidly blast frozen. To maintain moisture, they're injected with sodium phosphates and water-binding proteins, which give the meat its signature rubbery bounce when reheated. Because real onions can't survive freeze storage without turning mushy and sour, the sliders use reconstituted dehydrated onions, which develop a strong, fermented aroma once steamed. The cheese component isn't actual American cheese. Most boxes contain processed cheese products with emulsifiers that melt into a thin film instead of a creamy layer. Consumers often complain of pale patties, soggy buns, and a pungent onion smell, which are all symptoms of industrial thaw and steam meals. Suppose you love the fresh griddle flavor of actual White Castle. In that case, the frozen version is a letdown, a texture-altered, moisture-injected, microwave-engineered replica that doesn't deliver what the restaurant promises. Number 16. Wendy's Chili. Wendy's restaurant chili has a loyal fan base, but the canned grocery version relies on a completely different ingredient system designed for multi-year shelf stability. Instead of freshly cooked beef, the canned chili uses thermally processed meat, which undergoes pressure cooking inside the can. This high-heat process breaks down fat and connective tissue, giving the beef a soft, almost shredded texture compared to Wendy's chunkier restaurant chili. To survive long storage, the canned version contains calcium chloride texture firming, sodium benzoate preservation, and concentrated tomato bases, which make the broth thicker but also much saltier and more acidic. Beans are treated with firming agents that prevent splitting during canning, resulting in a slightly chalky bite instead of a tender stew bean. Because long cooking destroys much of the flavor, manufacturers add dehydrated peppers, onion powder, yeast extract, and natural flavors to simulate Wendy's slow-simmered taste. Yet consumer feedback frequently mentions a metallic undertone, a side effect of retort canning. The canned Wendy's chili is convenient, but it's a pressure-processed, preservative-supported, flavor-reconstructed product that tastes nothing like the real thing, and definitely not something you want to rely on for authentic comfort food. Number 15. Chick-fil-A sauce. Chick-fil-A sauce in restaurants tastes creamy, smoky, and freshly mixed. But the bottled grocery version is a heavily reformulated product built for extended shelf life, not freshness. To keep the sauce stable for months without separating, the formula uses thickened emulsifiers, including xanthan gum, modified cornstarch, and propylene glycol alginate. These additives create the sauce's dense, almost gel-like consistency, very different from the airy texture in store. Because real egg-based emulsions can't survive warm transport cycles, the bottled version uses heat-treated egg yolk derivatives along with preservative acids like potassium sorbate. These introduce a slightly sharp, synthetic tang that shoppers often notice after a few bites. The signature smoky sweetness also comes from flavor concentrates and caramelized sugar syrup, not the cleaner, mild honey-smoky blend used in restaurants. The oil base is another issue. Bottled Chick-fil-A sauce uses highly refined soybean oil, which has a neutral, almost flat taste. To compensate, the formula leans on natural flavors, spices, and smoke flavor extract to bring back its signature profile. The result is a sauce that's thicker, sweeter, more acidic, and more processed than the real thing, a shelf-stabilized imitation that never matches the fresh Chick-fil-A experience. Number 14. Buffalo Wild Wings sauces. Buffalo Wild Wings bottled sauces look like an easy way to recreate restaurant wings at home. Still, the grocery versions are reverse-engineered for mass distribution, heat exposure, and long-term stability. Instead of factual butter bases or freshly reduced chilies, the sauces rely heavily on syrup-thickened vinegar bases, maltodextrin, and industrial spice extracts. This gives the sauces an intense artificial kick rather than the layered heat found in-house. The bright, glossy appearance comes from stabilizing gums, modified starches, and color-protected spice blends that prevent separation and fading. Because the bottled sauces sit for months in warehouses, manufacturers add acid shields, preservative salts, and controlled pH systems, which create that harsh, lingering chemical heat consumers sometimes report. Some varieties, like mango, habanero, or Asian zing, use reconstituted fruit purees, ester-based flavorings, and artificial pepper aromatics, giving them a sticky, syrupy finish instead of a clean chili burn. The result is heat that feels sugary and acidic, not fresh or fiery. Customer complaints often mention that the bottled sauces taste sweeter, flatter, or more vinegar-heavy than what you get at BWW locations. These sauces aren't restaurant quality. They're preservative-driven, flavor-amplified, warehouse-proof versions designed for shelf life, not authenticity. Number 13. Pizza Hut Stuffed Crust Frozen Items. Pizza Hut stuffed crust pizza is addictive, fresh from the oven, but the frozen stuffed crust versions, sold in stores, rely on entirely different ingredients and processes. To create a crust that can survive freezing, thawing, and home baking, manufacturers use enzyme-modified flour, emulsifiers, and dough strengtheners like datum and monoglycerides. These additives cause the crust to bake into a dense, breadstick-like texture instead of the airy, stretchy crust Pizza Hut is known for. The stuffed cheese ring is even more engineered. Instead of fresh mozzarella sticks, the frozen version contains cheese analogs, made with dairy solids, starches, and melting salts that prevent breaking during freezing. Once baked, the cheese often turns gummy or oily, a sign of high stabilizer content. Consumer reviews frequently mention hollow crusts, where the cheese collapses, leaving empty space inside. The sauce on frozen Pizza Hut items is also reformulated with dehydrated tomato bases, acid regulators, and sweetness enhancers, giving it a sharper, sweeter, less savory profile than the restaurant sauce. Frozen Pizza Hut stuffed crust products are convenient, but they're a texture-corrected, freeze-resistant, flavor-reconstructed version of the real thing, and they rarely taste anything like the hot, freshly baked original. Number 12. Papa John's Ready-Made Garlic Sauce Tubs. Papa John's garlic sauce in restaurants is warm, whipped, and freshly emulsified, but the ready-made retail tubs are built for shelf stability, not freshness. Instead of using real dairy or fresh garlic, the packaged version relies on a base of highly refined soybean oil and hydrogenated fats, which stay semi-liquid at room temperature but give the sauce a waxy, greasy mouthfeel once heated. To preserve the garlic flavor without spoilage, the tubs use garlic powder concentrates, natural flavor extracts, citric acid stabilizers, and preservative salts. These ingredients simulate the aroma of fresh garlic but leave a sharp, artificial aftertaste that lingers much longer than the mild restaurant version. The sauce is also loaded with mono and diglycerides, which keep the oil from separating during temperature swings. Still, they also create the sauce's famously slick texture that never thoroughly blends with the pizza crust. Because the tubs must survive mass shipping and warm storage, the formula includes pH regulators, anti-spoilage systems, and deodorized oils, all of which flatten the flavor profile. Many consumers report the packaged version tasting oily, overly salty, or chemically garlicky, especially after microwaving. Papa John's garlic sauce tubs aren't the restaurant classic. They're a stabilized, oil-heavy, flavor-engineered imitation built to last, not to taste authentic. Number 11. Sonic Frozen Milkshake. Sonic's drive-in shakes are thick and freshly blended, but the grocery store frozen shake and slush mixes are some of the most artificially engineered dessert bases made under a restaurant brand. Instead of real ice cream or factual fruit slush bases, these mixes rely on reconstituted dairy powders, corn syrup solids, artificial sweeteners, and stabilizing gums like carrageenan and guar gum to create thickness after blending. The mixes undergo spray drying and powder extrusion, processes that strip natural flavors and replace them with synthetic drink esters, ester gum stabilizers, and neon-colored artificial dyes. This explains why grocery store Sonic slush mixes taste bright, candy-like, and aggressively sweet rather than icy and refreshing. Because slush textures break down rapidly, the formula includes anti-crystallization agents that prevent large ice chunks from forming. These compounds, especially sorbitol and maltodextrin, leave a sticky, coating sweetness that is totally different from Sonic's real slush machines. The milkshake mixes require heavy doses of emulsifiers, aeration agents, and anti-caking powders, giving them a chalky undertone once blended. Consumer complaints often mention chemical berry taste, artificial vanilla flavor, and lingering syrupiness. Sonic's frozen mixes are not true shakes or slushes. They're lab-stabilized, sugar-loaded dessert powders designed for convenience, not quality. Number 10. Arby's Curly Fries Seasoning Packet. Arby's curly fries are addictively seasoned, but the retail seasoning packet is an entirely different product built on layered artificial flavors rather than fresh fry seasoning. The original restaurant fries are coated before par frying. Still, the packet contains a dehydrated, powdered replica of the seasoning mix that relies on spray-dried onion, hydrolyzed soy protein, and artificial paprika extracts to mimic the flavor. To maintain flowability, the packet is loaded with silicon dioxide anti-caking agents, which prevent clumping but dull the spice aroma. The seasoning also relies heavily on disodium inosinate, disodium guanylate, and autolyzed yeast extract, compounds known for exaggerated savory impact, creating that intense, almost perfumed umami punch the packet is infamous for. Because the powder must survive months of humidity changes, it includes color-protected paprika oleoresin, stabilized chili powders, and acid regulators that give curly fries that familiar orange glow but also create a slightly metallic aftertaste. The packet's sugar and starch base caramelizes unevenly on homemade fries, leading to patchy dark spots and a gritty texture. Number 9. Nathan's Famous Frozen Hot Dogs. Nathan's hot dogs are legendary at the restaurant stands, but the frozen retail version is a very different product built for industrial mass production. To maintain moisture after freezing, the frozen dogs rely on water-binding agents like sodium phosphate and potassium lactate, chemicals that keep the meat soft but also create that springy, bouncy texture many people notice when they bite into the grocery store version. Instead of the fresh spice blend used in Nathan's flagship stands, the frozen dogs use spray-dried flavor concentrates, dehydrated garlic, and smoke flavor extract, which imitate the boardwalk aroma but leave a sharper, synthetic aftertaste. The casing is also factory optimized. Rather than natural sheep casing, many frozen versions use collagen casings engineered to survive freezing without splitting, which produce a weaker snap than the restaurant classic. The most concerning element is the use of nitrites and accelerator curing agents. While common in processed meats, the accelerated curing needed for frozen distribution can give the dogs a bright pink color and metallic edge, not present in fresh grilled versions. Nathan's frozen hot dogs aren't unsafe, but compared to the original, they're a texture-modified, flavor-simulated, freeze-stabilized replica that never delivers the real Nathan's experience. Number 8. Cinnabon Grocery Cinnamon Rolls. Cinnabon's mall cinnamon rolls are iconic because they're made fresh with yeast-raised dough, real brown sugar, and warm cream cheese frosting. The grocery store version, however, has to survive weeks in refrigerated cases, and that means the recipe is built on preservative-rich, chemically conditioned dough instead of fresh pastry. To prevent staling and drying, the dough includes sorbic acid, monoglycerides, datum, and enzyme-treated flours, which keep it soft but also give the rolls their chewy, slightly rubbery texture once baked at home. The frozen-proof process requires the dough to be partially pre-risen, which removes the fluffy lift people expect from a real Cinnabon. The cinnamon filling is not the authentic Macara cinnamon blend used in-store. Instead, it contains cinnamon flavor, oil, corn syrup solids, and palm shortening, producing a sticky sweet paste rather than the oozy, aromatic swirl Cinnabon is known for. The icing packets also rely on stabilized cream cheese powder, emulsifiers, and glucose syrup to prevent separation, leaving the frosting sweeter, flatter, and less tangy than the mall version. Customers often complain of gummy centers, crusty edges, and overly sugary scent, classic symptoms of chemically stabilized doughs. Number 7. Baskin-Robbins at-home ice cream. Baskin-Robbins store ice cream is churned fresh with a controlled overrun and cold chain distribution, but the at-home grocery pints use a totally different formula built for extended freezer survival. Instead of traditional ice cream bases, these pints rely on reconstituted dairy mixtures, whey protein concentrates, and corn syrup solids, which keep the texture soft but produce a sweet, slightly chalky finish. To maintain scoopability at sub-zero temperatures, the formula includes propylene glycol monoesters, polysorbate 80, and guar gum, a stabilization system that prevents ice crystals but gives the ice cream a whipped, artificial creaminess instead of the dense richness of shop-made BR ice cream. Many flavors also contain flavor esters, dyed inclusions, and artificial marshmallow or caramel analogs, rather than the real mix-ins used at BR stores. Because the pints must endure temperature swings during transport, the structure is reinforced with emulsifiers and crystallization inhibitors, which can create a rubbery surface layer after a few days in the freezer. Consumer complaints mention weak flavors, icy pockets, and overly sweet mix-ins, symptoms of mass-market stabilizer-heavy ice cream. The grocery store Baskin-Robbins line isn't foul, but it's a freeze-resistant, gum-thickened, flavor-boosted version of the real BR experience. Number 6. IHOP at-home pancakes and syrups. IHOP's restaurant pancakes taste fluffy because they're made on a hot griddle with fresh batter, buttermilk, and controlled steam rise. The IHOP at-home pancakes and syrup sold in stores, however, are manufactured for freezer stability and mass transport, so the formulas are completely different. The frozen pancakes contain dough conditioners, spray-dried egg powder, and shelf-stable leavening acids, which give them a uniform, spongy texture instead of the restaurant's airy rise. To prevent freezer burn, the batter is partially cooked, flash frozen, and coated lightly with release oils, which explains the rubbery chew people complain about after microwaving. The syrups are even more industrial. IHOP restaurant syrup is simple corn syrup with flavor. Still, the bottled retail version uses high fructose corn syrup, caramel color, thickening gums, acidity regulators, and synthetic maple aromatics, creating a heavy, candy-like sweetness that tastes nothing like actual maple or IHOP's warm dispenser syrup. The viscosity is engineered through gum blends to pour slowly but hold shape on pancakes, giving it that oddly gelled sheen under light. IHOP at-home products are convenient, but they're a preservative-held, partially pre-cooked, syrup-enhanced imitation of the real pancake house experience. Number 5. Denny's Grocery Breakfast Skillets. Denny's breakfast skillets in restaurants are cooked fresh on a flat-top grill, where potatoes crisp, eggs set naturally, and cheese melts from radiant heat. The grocery store frozen skillets, however, are constructed with pre-blanched, oil-coated potatoes, rehydrated egg fragments, and stabilized cheese shreds, all built to endure months of deep freeze storage. The potatoes are the giveaway instead of fresh-cut hash browns. They're made from par-cooked, dehydrated potato blends, treated with sodium acid pyrophosphate to prevent browning. This gives them their trademark waxy, translucent texture after reheating. The scrambled eggs in the mix are actually egg patties chopped into cubes, created using liquid egg product, citric acid, and anti-cinnaresis gums to stop moisture leak. That's why they taste firm and rubbery instead of fluffy. The sausage and cheese components rely on emulsifying salts, starch-filled binders, and smoke flavor substitutes, making the skillet taste bold but unmistakably processed. Because frozen skillets reheat unevenly, the sauce system is thickened with xanthan gum and modified starch, giving the dish a sticky gloss instead of a creamy melt. Number 4. Roy Rogers Frozen Sandwiches. Roy Rogers is known for freshly griddled roast beef and fried chicken sandwiches, but the frozen grocery sandwiches are engineered to survive microwaving, not to taste like real fast food. The buns undergo chemical softening with calcium propionate, sorbic acid, mono, and diglycerides, so they don't turn rock hard in the freezer, but this also gives them that soggy, doughy collapse once heated. The meat is even more heavily processed. Roy Rogers frozen roast beef and chicken patties are made from restructured meat, a blend of mechanically separated cuts, binders, and water retention agents like sodium phosphate that keep the patty moist but give it an unmistakably spongy, compressed texture. The seasoning layer is applied using flavor sprays, not authentic marinade, so the taste sits on the surface instead of penetrating the meat. Cheese and sauces are formulated with emulsifiers and anti-separation systems, making them melt into glossy films rather than gooey layers. Many consumers report rubbery patties, watery buns, and a metallic aftertaste, all classic symptoms of industrial microwave-ready sandwiches. Roy Rogers frozen sandwiches aren't a shortcut to the restaurant. They're a water-bound, binder-heavy, microwave-optimized approximation that loses everything people love about the original. Number 3. Popeye's Biscuit Mix. Popeye's restaurant biscuits work because they're built on fresh fat distribution, cold butter chunks, hot oven shock, and real lift. The boxed Popeye's Biscuit Mix can't recreate that, so the formula leans on an entirely different chemical system: prehydrated shortening powders, instant rising leaveners, and dough relaxers. These allow the dough to puff, even when mixed at room temperature, but they also create an oddly uniform, cake-like crumb instead of flaky biscuit layers. The biggest issue is the mix's reliance on heat-tolerant saturated fat replacements. These powdered fats don't melt the same way real butter or lard melts. They liquefy slowly, causing fat pooling inside the dough and a dense, pasty center after baking. The blend also contains antioxidant preservatives to keep the fats from going rancid, which contributes a faintly waxy aroma you never find in real biscuits. Because the mix is designed for extended shelf life, the flour is treated with enzyme inhibitors that slow spoilage but also limit browning, so the biscuits often bake up pale unless overcooked. Consumers report a starchy afterbite and flat, salty taste, both typical of chemically leavened shelf-stable mixes. Number 2. Applebee's Rib Sauce. Applebee's ribs in the restaurant come from a low-simmer reduction that develops flavor through evaporation, caramelization, and smoke contact. The store-bought rib sauce, however, is engineered for thermal stability, not slow cooking, so the formula behaves completely differently. Instead of a naturally reduced base, the bottled sauce relies on concentrated tomato paste, glucose syrup, and acidity regulators, forming a thick body without ever being cooked down. This makes the sweetness feel one-tone and syrupy, because it isn't coming from absolute reduction, it's coming from processed sugars. To prevent microbial growth during months of unrefrigerated storage, the sauce uses a layered preservation system: sodium benzoate, potassium sorbate, and high-acid vinegar blends. These keep the product safe, but introduce a sharp, lingering bite that reacts strangely when heated on meat, sometimes turning slightly metallic. The smoky signature flavor isn't from wood contact at all. It comes from liquid smoke distillates, esterized flavor compounds, and caramel color, which create a burnt aroma instead of real smoke depth. When brushed on ribs, the sauce often separates under heat, leaving sticky sugar patches and a glossy surface film, signs of artificial thickening rather than actual barbecue reduction. Number 1. Krispy Kreme packaged donuts. Fresh Krispy Kreme donuts taste magical because they're eaten within hours of frying, while the glaze is still in a state of warm crystallization. The packaged grocery versions, on the other hand, must survive multiple temperature cycles, long-distance shipping, and shelf storage, which fundamentally changes everything. The donuts are fried, cooled, frozen, thawed, and re-glazed using humidity-controlled enrobing lines, a process that forces the glaze to crystallize in large, brittle layers instead of forming the thin, glassy sheen Krispy Kreme is known for. That's why packaged donuts turn chalky, flaky, or wet sticky, depending on humidity. To slow staling, the dough is infused with anti-staling enzymes, amylase, hemicellulase, and moisture-holding compounds. These keep the crumbs soft for weeks, but give it a squishy bread-like chew instead of the airy melt of fresh Krispy Kreme. The oil used for production is treated with antioxidants to prevent rancidity, but over time, this still contributes to the donut's slightly waxy smell. The glaze contains invert sugar, stabilizers, and film-forming agents, allowing it to survive packaging but eliminating the fresh, warm crack when you bite into a store donut. But don't worry, it's not all bad news. Not every restaurant brand item is loaded with cheap oils, fillers, and questionable ingredients. Some are actually clean, simple, and made with real food. They might not be the trendiest picks on the menu, but they're the ones you can choose without regret. Starting with number 10. Panera Clean Label Soup Line. Panera's Clean Label soups are one of the rare restaurant-branded grocery products that actually deliver on what they promise. Unlike most retail soups that rely on starch-thickened bases, powdered dairy, or freeze-stable gums, Panera's Clean line avoids artificial flavors, preservatives, and high-intensity stabilizers. Instead, the soups are made using slow-cooked stock, real vegetables, and heat-treated cream bases that maintain body without synthetic texture boosters. What makes these soups impressive is their approach to shelf stability. Instead of chemicals, Panera uses high-temperature, short-time pasteurization, which preserves flavor while ensuring safety. This method prevents the overcooked taste familiar in canned soups. Ingredients like carrots, leeks, and chicken are cooked separately before blending, preventing the mushy vegetable collapse typical of mass-market soups. Number 9. Cava Hummus and Dips. Cava's grocery hummus and Mediterranean dips succeed because they skip the shortcuts that most mass-market hummus brands rely on. Instead of a heat-treated chickpea paste standard in shelf-stable hummus, Cava uses a refrigerated formulation built on fresh pureed chickpeas, cold-pressed citrus, tahini, and olive oil, which preserves both flavor and nutrient density. Cava avoids potassium sorbate, citric acid concentrates, and gum-thickened emulsions, which can give hummus a gelatinous or overly smooth texture. Their tahini isn't a powdered stabilizer. It's real stone-ground sesame, which provides natural emulsification and a clean, nutty finish. This results in a hummus that stays creamy without artificial gums or added starch. Another win? Their dips are produced under cold chain protection, preventing oxidation and preserving volatile flavor compounds like garlic oil and roasted pepper aromatics. That's why Cava dips taste fresh instead of metallic or sour. Their lemon flavor also comes from real juice, not from lemon essence or synthetic esters, which many brands use. Number 8. Chipotle branded home kits. Chipotle's grocery kits aren't perfect, but the clean ingredient options, like their cilantro lime rice kits and specific seasoning blends, stand out for using short, simple ingredient lists with no artificial flavors, spray-dried fillers, or synthetic acidity. The brand's insistence on real ingredients only carries over into these kits by eliminating the additives typically found in boxed meal starters. Their rice and tortilla components avoid dough conditioners, bleaching agents, and anti-mold preservatives, instead relying on mild refrigeration and steam pasteurization to keep them fresh. Chipotle's spice packets also skip MSG analogs, like disodium inosinate or hydrolyzed vegetable protein. Instead, they use straight herbs, citrus powders, and smoked chilies, resulting in cleaner, more authentic flavor. Chipotle's beans in pouches feature slow-cooked whole beans rather than rehydrated bean flakes, which helps retain real fiber structure and prevents the gluey texture common in canned beans. The pouches are preserved via heat stabilization, not chemical preservatives, keeping the ingredient list minimal. Number 7. Nuke's Eatery Soup Jars. Nuke's Eatery soup jars stand out because they avoid the harsh thermal processing used in most jarred soups. Instead of retort sterilization, which often flattens flavors and turns vegetables mushy, Nuke's uses gentle kettle cooking followed by rapid chilling. This keeps textures intact and preserves the soup's natural aroma. Their ingredient lists skip typical additives like modified starches, dehydrated cream bases, and artificial color stabilizers. What you get instead is real mirepoix, stock reductions, and fresh herbs that behave more like homemade soup than shelf-stable products. Their dairy soups use pasteurized fresh cream, not powdered analogs, giving them a natural richness without gums. Nuke's also avoids sorbates and benzoates, relying on controlled refrigeration for safety. For shoppers tired of canned soups that taste metallic or over-thickened, Nuke's offers a clean, minimally processed option that feels genuinely from scratch. Number 6. Sweetgreen Bottled Dressings. Wheatgreen's bottled dressings succeed because they hold on to the brand's core philosophy: short ingredients, no fillers. These dressings use cold-blended oils, fresh citrus, and real herbs, not emulsifiers or gum thickeners. The result is a dressing that separates naturally, exactly how real vinaigrettes behave without artificial stabilizers. Sweetgreen also avoids refined sugars and instead uses honey or fruit-based sweetness, which preserves a cleaner flavor profile. Their tahini and yogurt dressings rely on real sesame and cultured dairy, not powder concentrates, giving them a creamy consistency without synthetic creaminess agents. The biggest win is transparency. Every ingredient is recognizable, and there's no color-protecting chemistry or vinegar boosters. Because these dressings are refrigerated, they retain their brightness and herb aromas, making them a rare bottled option that actually tastes fresh. Number 5. True Food Kitchen Frozen Bowls. True Food Kitchen's frozen bowls are one of the few freezer meals that maintain whole food integrity. Instead of relying on heavy sauces or starch thickeners, the bowls highlight vegetable-forward recipes with clean oils and whole grains. Their flash freeze method preserves texture without needing gums or artificial stabilizers, so vegetables stay firm and grains remain distinct. The proteins, whether tofu, chicken, or shrimp, use simple marinades without phosphates or moisture injection treatments, avoiding the rubbery texture common in frozen entrees. Seasonings come from actual spices and herbs, not natural flavors, which gives the bowls a grounded, homemade taste. Because the recipes avoid refined oils, synthetic flavor enhancers, and dye-protected vegetables, they reheat cleanly and don't release the oily sheen typical of frozen meals. For anyone looking for a genuinely health-focused frozen option, True Food Kitchen bowls offer nutrient-forward, minimally processed convenience. Number 4. Amy's Drive-Thru Organic Retail Items. Amy's Drive-Thru retail products stand out because they follow organic standards from start to finish, with no hidden additives, no synthetic preservatives, and no industrial shortcut ingredients. Their meals rely on whole vegetables, organic grains, and slow-simmered sauces, not powdered concentrates. Amy's uses steam cooking and batch freezing, which protects texture without the gums or stabilizers found in typical frozen dinners. The cheeses are RBST-free. The oils are high quality, often expeller pressed, and the proteins never include phosphates or filler blends. This gives their burritos, bowls, and burgers a noticeably clean flavor and a more natural melt and texture. Because Amy's avoids chemical preservatives, safety comes from controlled temperature and flash freezing, not additives. The ingredient lists read like home cooking, simple spices, whole tomatoes, and real beans, making these some of the cleanest restaurant brand retail items available today. Number 3. Noodles & Company At-Home Clean Bowls. Noodles & Company's clean bowls for grocery shoppers mirror the chain's recent push toward real ingredients and simplified recipes. Unlike many frozen pasta meals, these bowls avoid gel-based cheese sauces, modified starch thickeners, and gum-stabilized gravies. Instead, their sauces rely on real cream, aged cheeses, and fresh herb purees. The pasta is flash-cooked rather than steam-extruded, so it keeps its bite without needing texture agents. Vegetables are frozen using IQF technology that preserves firmness without preservatives. Even the proteins, like grilled chicken, skip phosphate injections, giving them a more natural texture. Because the bowls don't use artificial colors or enhanced flavors, they heat up cleanly without the greasy separation common in frozen pasta dishes. For anyone wanting a fast, reliable meal that doesn't feel industrial, these bowls deliver simple, real food comfort with minimal processing. Number 2. Mendocino Farms Sandwich Kits. Mendocino Farms sandwich kits translate their restaurant philosophy directly into grocery form. Clean proteins, real vegetables, and scratch-made sauces. Instead of using deli fillers or preservative-loaded meats, the kits feature whole sliced proteins free from nitrates and phosphate injections. The bread is sourced from clean bakeries, no dough conditioners, no bleaching agents, no artificial softeners. The standout element is the sauce packets. They're made with cold blended ingredients like herbs, citrus, and yogurt, not emulsifier-heavy mayonnaise substitutes. Produced components like slaws or greens are washed and packed without chlorine-based preservatives. Everything is clearly labeled, portioned, and free from artificial flavors, synthetic colors, or hidden gums. For shoppers who want a premium feeling, from-scratch sandwich without prep time, Mendocino Farms kits are one of the few immaculate restaurant-branded options in the refrigerated aisle. Number 1. Just Salad Marketplace Dressings. Just Salad's marketplace dressings lead the clean label category because they rely on chef-style formulas rather than industrial emulsions. The base of each dressing is built on cold-pressed oils, real citrus, fresh herbs, and honest spices, with no gums or stabilizers to thicken the mixture artificially. This natural separation is intentional. It's precisely how fresh dressings behave. Their dairy-based options use genuine cultured yogurt or real cheese, not powdered dairy analogs. Sweetness comes from honey or fruit, not corn syrups. And unlike many retail dressings, there are no preservatives, color protectants, or acid boosters added. Because the dressings are refrigerated and pasteurized gently, they retain bright aromas and a clean finish without tasting processed. For consumers who want something that tastes like it was made minutes ago instead of manufactured months ago, Just Salad's marketplace line is the gold standard for clean restaurant brand dressings.